YouTube channel. This is going to be the third of a series of many videos associated with the User at GitLab playlist under this channel. This series is going to be about tasks, techniques, and actions that are to be performed by a GitLab general user as opposed to a GitLab administrator. And those are the actions that would be for like writing code, modifying code, uploading code, and then eventually pushing the code up to a repository, or simply getting a copy of the code, forking it to another developer, and they write their own additional changes to it, and maybe recommit it back or keep it as a copy of a new set of code. That's the reason why you would have a GitLab repository. So this video is actually about creating a repository, which is really just a web directory on a GitLab server, also known as a remote. So we need to make sure that we mention the requirement that the developer, the person who is going to post or push code up to that web directory, that repository, has a .git config file in their own user path. And that's usually developed, or rather created, on the development machine itself. And there's a couple, there was a video rather, user at gitlab.002_install and configure local Git account. Made before this video. This is, again, the third video. So the second video, the one prior to this one, actually covered those details. We also need to identify the fact that there is going to be no prior existing project space in this web interface here. So we will be creating our very own first new project repository in this web interface. And then I will show you later on in another set of videos how to get a copy of the changes, which, you know, when you create a repository from scratch, there is nothing in it by default. Well, nothing of substance. And finally, when I'm creating the project, I'm going to have to configure it. And I can configure it based on some limitations of user accessibility in terms of do we want it to be publicly wide open if the GitLab server is up on the internet and exposed through a firewall? That would be for public. Or do we want to keep it restricted to only users that are defined within the GitLab environment, specifically within the constructs of users and groups within this GitLab? Again, if it was on the internet. In our case, this sample GitLab server, this web interface that you're seeing here that I'm interacting with, this is actually not on the internet, but that's a moot point for the sake of this video. And then the third category is private, which is kind of like internal, but it'll also allow you to share a repository with somebody out on the internet, along with users that are inside the authentication domain of this particular GitLab instance. This GitLab instance has local accounts. It's not tied into Active Directory, but if you had it tied into Active Directory, or if you are local, you can create your groups and users associated with those groups and make use of them with either the internal style option or the private or option for restricting access to a project. Finally, we will show you the difference between a working directory and a staging directory, but that will be on a later video when it comes to doing commits. So many things to be excited about, and so let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and log in to this GitLab server, this remote on the web front end. I'm not going to tell you what my password is. Okay. Now, when you first start off with a GitLab, brand new, fresh, it doesn't have any projects. I have created some users and some groups. So what I'm going to do is create a project that the group or users will be associated with. I'm going to create a blank project as opposed to creating one from template. I don't have any templates, so we're not worried about that. We're not going to import a project from another GitLab or GitHub instance, for that matter. Not another repository through a Git command of any other sort. We're just going to start a brand new web directory on our own right here. So click Create Blank Project. All right. So we have some fields that need to be populated and some radial options we need to choose. Up here, I'm going to choose the project name, and if you notice, I'm typing it all uppercase, dummy001, all uppercase. But down here, this thing called project slug is actually in all lowercase. You didn't do anything wrong. This is the way the application works. And you need to be very aware of the fact that you have to be case sensitive when you use this URL, especially if you're running on a Linux machine. If you're running on a Windows machine, probably not, but just be aware of the fact that this is a case sensitive string. And now I have the ability to choose whether I'm going to create this project under the first group, one that I manually created before this video, or the W French user explicitly. So I could have my own repository, or I could have a specifically identified group that I might be a member of. It depends on how I'm going to share my project. In my case, if I do under the first group, I can do that. And then I'm going to put a little tagline here, and I will show you where this shows up in a couple different places. I'm going to say, this is the tagline for the dummy 001 project under the first group, created for the sake of demonstrating in a video for YouTube. You might have a different purpose. You might say this particular project is for storing all the shell scripts associated with managing user builds to a custom corporate standard, whatever your needs. Here's where we get down to the definition of private, internal, or public. In my case, I've only got the option for doing private, and I'm going to stick with that. And then I'm not going to initialize this repository with a README. I don't need to do that, but I can. I'm going to hit the check mark. I'm going to do the create project. And remember this tagline. This is the tagline for W1, okay? Hit create project. Give it a moment, and now it refreshes. This is immediately what happens. This is normal. And in fact, it tells you, hey, great. We were successful in creating this project. So I'm going to go ahead and click the X on that little banner. And now I see the full spelling in uppercase. I see the padlock, and my mouse over it, it tells me, hey, this is a private configured project. So whatever code is posted in here is not shared with anybody on the internet. Again, my particular GitLab remote server is not available, accessible, usable from any developers on the internet. This is just for the sake of doing a video and sharing this knowledge with you. Here's the tagline. This is the tagline for the dummy 01 project under the first group, created for the sake of demonstrating in a video for YouTube. And this is a bunch of other stuff that we will cover at some point. Again, you need to make sure that if you're a developer and you're going to need to push changes to this repository, this web directory, with a specific name of dummy001, who would do that? But they might. You need to make sure you have a Git Config File, which is actually in your user home directory, and then it's .git_config. And basically what it does is it stores some custom configurations about you as a user when you post changes, and also you as a user and what you want your environment to behave like when you get ready to do a commit. And we'll talk about that later in another video. So you can see you can do a git clone, pull down stuff, basically pull down the web directory, and then cd into dummy001 and switch to what's called the main branch. This is new in GitLab 14.x. This is very new. In fact, this is the first time I've ever seen a git switch command ever used in this particular window, this particular page, after a new project has been created. Or if you have a working directory on your development machine, and you again are the developer and you're trying to push changes up, but you just created this web directory in the web interface, now you can come here and you can cd into the web directory you cd into the directory of your working directory, which is really deep, where you start showing your files and your subdirectories and so on. And then you would do your init, again specifying you're initializing a branch called main. You're going to commit those changes to origin, but you do that push. Okay, so first you do cd into the directory, you initialize the database, specifying that you're going to be in the main branch. You're going to create a alias, so to speak, called origin, and you're going to associate it with this long path. This is a SSH URL. We'll talk about those later. And then you're going to add your changes, whatever is in the working directory. And then once you do that, you've moved a copy from your working directory into your staging directory. And then, this prepares the memory of the system to be prepared to commit a copy from working directory to your staging directory. And then when you get push, it will send from the staging directory up to the web-based directory, which in turn would actually overwrite this page when you came back to this project. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to click on GitLab up here in the left corner. And now you have a listing of all the projects. Well, there's one. No big deal, right? First group /dummy001. We just created this. There's the tagline, so you know what this project is for before you even dive into it. You don't have to do the tagline, but it might be a good idea if you do your diligence like a professional and fill in the blanks and say, before I dive into this web directory, what's the purpose of it? Just be professional. All right, click on this little link here, and now we come back to that same page. So that's all I need to show you for the time being. Again, you know how to create a Git config by looking at video 2 of this series of a user interacting with GitLab. And on to the next video. Thank you for your time.